At this time, we get to hear from the great Kahan Shaul Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom! Praise Yahweh, saints of Yahweh. Beautiful, beautiful sight of the gold. You may be seated. We're going to continue in our discussion about the gold here and what it represents to Yahweh and the awesome things that are taking place in the plan of Yahweh, this finishing of the plan here, finishing this great work that Yahweh established from the beginning. Then this was in His plan from the very beginning. And we're going to see the unity that this gold represents today in the Scriptures, a few Scriptures here, and how we can maintain this. You know, it's not enough to have the gold on the outside, brethren. We got to have it fully and deeply within our minds on the inside and living it every minute of the day. Now please turn over to Genesis 1:26, because this plan, which is unity, here it was first mentioned in Genesis 1:26. Then Yahweh said, I will make man in my image and according to my likeness, and they will have rulership, that is guardianship, protecting, and keeping it in the way Yahweh made. Remember, Yahweh said that everything He made, it was right, righteous, perfect for mankind, and perfect for life to exist. It's not rulership to take advantage of or to manipulate or destroy. Over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing, every microorganism that sustains life, that creeps upon the earth. All right, this was Yahweh's plan from the beginning, to make mankind in His image and likeness. And notice here, this is man. This is mankind, not Malachim. He's not talking about neither outward appearance in looking physically exactly like Yahweh, the facial features and everything. He's talking about character. And Yahweh's character, if you remember, is always choosing righteousness. And that's what the name Yahweh means. All right? I am what I choose to be, and I choose to be righteous. Yahweh chooses at all times to submit to His perfect laws. These laws have been tried like gold, we'll see, tried by fire, tried and tested and proven to bring and maintain and sustain life. And this is what Yahweh always chooses. This is the character of Yahweh, and this is the character that's going to be developed in mankind, but according to this plan. Yahweh made the Malachim in a certain way instantly. They didn't develop. They didn't have the subconscious mind, and they weren't brought along and developed. They were just created in that way. So they didn't exactly choose to become like Yahweh. Mankind, on the other hand, we have been made subject to vanity and then called out by Yahweh and given that choice to choose. But Yahweh is doing this to bring mankind into complete unity with Himself. And this is the goal. This is the goal, the final result of the plan of Yahweh. This is the same thing that the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program teaches here. Not going into the Scriptures, but this same process. Remember, thoughts. Thoughts lead to what? Feelings. Feelings lead to what? And actions lead to rewards or consequences. All right? But it starts with a thought. Remember these things. It starts with a thought. And this is the same thing with Yahweh. You know, He didn't say there was anything wrong with thoughts or feelings or actions. Yahweh Himself has thoughts, He has feelings, and He has actions. The difference between Yahweh's thoughts and feelings and actions is that His are always in submission to His laws. He never deviates one bit. He knows that if he deviated one bit, whether in his thoughts, feelings, or actions from Yahweh, from his laws, that it would bring destruction. And that's what he's trying to teach mankind right now. Yahweh is in 100% agreement with his laws. He's in 100% submission. You know, the world hates that word submission. You know, nobody's going to tell me what to do. You know, I'm free, black, white, yellow, and 21, and I can do whatever I want to do. You know, just quit making the payments on that fancy car or truck or house and see if you can do whatever you want to do. You'll have the sheriff or the repo man banging on your door quicker than you can think these days. But Yahweh himself, the creator of the universe, is in complete submission to his laws. Yes, the creator of the universe submits. He submits to these laws, knowing the results, knowing the life, the beauty that they bring. And remember, Yahweh's laws are perfect. He tells us in Psalm 19, they're more to be desired than fine gold. And he's talking about worldly possessions and worldly wealth, the physical gold. The physical gold by itself doesn't get you very far. And remember, those who seek after gold and lust after it will never be satisfied with it. Not that gold, not the gold that perishes. Yahweh tells us, seek after the things that will not perish. But he also tells us that these laws convert the whole person. Meaning here that mankind is not already in the image and likeness of Yahweh. Contrary to what the Christian preachers tell you that, oh, you're already in the image and likeness of Yahweh. No, not so. Yahweh is making man. This is his plan, to make man. It's a process. It's not an automatic thing when a person is born that they're automatically in the image and likeness of Yahweh. But Yahweh does, as we just seen there, and if you mark that in your notes, Psalm 19, there he uses gold and various golden items to represent this plan and to represent the results of his plan. To picture this with gold, the goal, to picture the goal that he has, which is 100% unity with his laws, and then the process that it takes, the conversion. All right, nobody came here to the house of Yahweh in the image and likeness of Yahweh. All right, we didn't come here knowing the laws, and I don't care what books we read out in the world, all right, or what we listened to or what we thought we knew. No, we didn't know the laws of Yahweh. All right, and that's a fact. It's a scriptural fact. You know, even though some have tried to say, well, I already knew that law, or I already knew that, or we already knew that in the assemblies or some other church or something. You know, no, you didn't. None of us knew the laws of Yahweh when we came here. We had a desire. We knew a little bit of them. You might have been able to count to 7, which had to go past 3 to get to 7. So that's a leap right in itself to get to 7, knowing which day is the 7th day. But we didn't know anything. Look how many years it took us and is taking us, and I'll bet any money, I'll bet any gold that we still don't know everything about the Sabbath day. We're going to be learning about it in Yahweh Shema very soon, and praise Yahweh. We're never going to get to the end of the knowledge here, but we came here in obedience to Deuteronomy 12, and if you'll turn over to Deuteronomy 12, we came here to this place. We obeyed. We sought the kingdom. We sought, and we are to seek the habitation, in verse 5, of your Father, the house of Yahweh. And we came here to stop. The first thing he tells you to do is the STOP acronym. Stop. Look at verse 8. He doesn't use the word stop, but he says, you must not at all do, which means stop. You must stop doing as we are doing here this day, every man doing what is right in his own eyes. You know, there's 1,000,001 denominations on the face of this earth, 1,000,001 religions that came forth from the 12 tribes, one for each of their personalities, and they all think they're doing right. They all think they're in the image and likeness of Yahweh, or the Creator. They're in the image and likeness of God, that's for sure, and God is one confused being there, and asleep as well. But that's what we're to stop doing. We came here to stop doing what is right in our own eyes and start learning to do what is right in Yahweh's eyes. All right, this is why we were called here. Now, one of the main things that Yahweh uses, the main items that He used in showing His plan from beginning to end, is the 7-lamp lampstand, which is made of pure gold, one solid piece, hammered out of pure gold, one solid piece, shining bright before the throne of Yahweh, and fueled by pure golden oil from olives, from olive trees, and fed in these last days, as Zechariah 4 tells us, by the chosen choicest branch of the olive tree. And if you'll mark in your note, Exodus 25, well, let's turn there right quick. Exodus 25, in verse 31, make a lampstand, that's on page 66, verse 25, verse 31, make a lampstand of pure gold and hammer it out. Hammer it out. Remember, Pastor taught us about being hammered out here, base and shaft. Here, and verse 40, make sure that you make these things according to the pattern. That is the pattern before Yahweh's throne, which He made reminders for Himself there to look upon and remember His plan. Not that He would forget, but it was for us not to forget. Actually, because then He commanded Moshe to make these things here according to the pattern, that mankind might not forget. That's the reason for the holy garments, the talit and the tzitzit and the kippah. So we wrap ourselves in these things, and we never forget the laws of Yahweh in this plan of Yahweh, bringing us into unity with Yahweh. But in Revelation 1, 12 and 13, we see that Yachanan was shown the same thing that Moshe was shown. And lo and behold, who was in the midst of the lampstand? The 7 lamps. In other words, 7 works from beginning to end in completing this plan of the perfect unity, a people in perfect unity. Well, lo and behold, who's in the midst of the lampstand? Do you remember? Anybody? Yeshua Messiah is who he saw here. I'm having to skip over some of the reading, but it was Yeshua Messiah that he saw. He was the beginning of that plan, and all the work from Abel all the way up to Yeshua's mommy and daddy was to bring forth that center lamp, which is Yeshua. So he is the beginning and the end of that work. Remember, he says, I am the first and the last. He is the first and the last. He was the beginning of it. Not that he was alive then, but he had to be the result of a breeding program that started back that far in the very beginning of mankind, when Yahweh created mankind, and through teaching and learning by the ancestors of Yeshua to bring forth a man who would never choose sin. He is the only man alive, or whoever lived, rather, he's alive, and whoever lived, who is ever alive, who never chose sin. He always chose, like Yahweh, to be in submission to Yahweh's laws. All right, to be in submission to those laws. Now look at Revelation 10:7, because here is the end of that work which Yeshua is doing, but notice who he's doing it through. Yeshua is no longer on earth. He's separate from sinners. He's prohibited from coming on earth at this time. All right, but he is dealing with earth, and he is dealing with the last remnant, but notice how. In 10:7, Revelation 10:7, but in the days of the voice of the 7th Malach, when he will begin to sound the great secret of Yahweh, that is this great plan to bring mankind into unity, Genesis 1:26, would be finished, as he declared to his servants, the prophets. No, he wouldn't have any other work unless it was first prophesied. And it's done through the pure golden oil. And mark in your notes, Zechariah 4:12 through 14. This pure oil is how Genesis 1:26 is accomplished. Does Yahweh come down from heaven to speak to us individually? No, you may be hearing voices, but unless it's the voice of Israel Hawkins, it ain't got nothing to do with Yahweh. I guarantee it. All right, so quit listening to it and turn that sermon up louder. But he's not whispering in your ear. You know, there's only one way to get that pure golden oil. The world is in the mess it's in right now because they rejected the pure word of Yahweh, the pure golden oil. They had it. The 12 tribes had the pure word. They wrote it wrong. And as we read last Sabbath in Zephaniah, Yahweh promised that he would restore the pure word to us, that pure golden oil. Well, Zechariah 4, Revelation 11 and 10 there, just a few, showed us how and who he would use to do it. All right, this pure oil is what is needed. What is needed to be in 100% unity. And Yahweh, through Yahshua and through the seventh Malach, supplies the pure golden oil liberally, generously to all. It's supplied. He's supplying it to us. What do we supply? What do we supply? Our agreement to it, our submission to it. Just like Yahshua did, and he said, I and my Father are one. Yes, Yahweh supplies us the oil, but we can't just let it spill on the ground. We have to put it in our lamps, and we have to let it shine bright. Put it to work within our lives, and we need to agree with it first. Going back to the thoughts, feelings, and actions. We must be in agreement with everything that comes forth from the house of Yahweh because it's the pure oil. There's no debate. There's no discussion about it. It's a here it is, do this and don't do that. How easier can it get? All right? For a guy like me, I need it laid out, step by step, a recipe. All right? And Yahweh gave it to us. It's so easy. Look at 1 Corinthians 1:10 and remember Amos 3:7. How can two walk together unless they're, which is an action, walking together, unless they're in thought are the same. They're agreeing. Okay? They're in agreement, meaning their thoughts are the same. And if their thoughts are the same, their feelings are going to be the same, right? And then their actions are going to be the same. Now I appeal to you, brothers, that's 1 Corinthians 1, verse 10. I appeal to you, brothers, by the authority of our King, Yahshua Messiah, and this is how we be in unity, that you all speak the same thing. Or as in Timothy, it says, not being double-tongued, not giving a different answer. That there be no divisions among you. If there's divisions among you, is that unity? Can you have a civil war and beat each other in the unity? No, Yahweh's hammering us into unity, but not through war or fighting. It's through getting over our own selves. You know, it's being humble. We got to get the pride out of us, brethren. That's what causes the divisions, is not submitting. Who's going to tell me what to do? Well, answer that. I'll ask you on your deathbed. And you tell me what you're going to do tomorrow. That you may be perfectly united in mind and thought. That's the beginning of it. You can't go any further with Yahweh until you're perfectly united in mind and thought. Thoughts, feelings, and actions, okay? Keep that in mind. It's the same thing that the peaceful solution teaches. Now, how do we get our thoughts into unity? Look at 2 Corinthians 10, verse 5. It says, notice the last part of that verse, bringing under control every thought into the obedience as to the Messiah. Just like Yahshua did, he brought every thought into control. This is the only way we can do it. Now, I want to read you a little bit about gold. I'm going to have to skip some of this here, but there's 4 words in the Hebrew that are used, 4 main words that are used to describe gold. Okay? And it says here, I'm just going to have to read the summary of it here, but he says, the above 4 terms, therefore, now think about the process of being called out and converted and becoming this fine gold before Yahweh. The above 4 terms, therefore, present the idea of gold as, number 1, the bright, shining metal. And it also goes back to Zechariah 14, that first word, Zahab, the golden oil. Okay, as shining bright. Which, number 2, is dug up from the earth. All right, or taken from the rock. All right, you got to be extracted, or as it says here, dug out, cut up. It has the idea of difficult, and think of the calling out and getting over ourselves here in a condition in which it may be used to some extent as it is either hammered. All right, we got to be hammered or melted. Remember, gold tried in the fire. But is number 3, purified and refined. So it's dug out. Then it's got to be purified and refined for the choicest purposes, which it is then treasured with care. And that's how the process goes with Yahweh. All right, treasured with care. Now, the world has a saying here that you can't judge a book by its cover. And looking at most books you get from the world, that is a very true statement. But I want to show you some books here that you can judge by their cover. All right? These are the books of Israel, the pure golden oil that we have in gold covers, and which truly represent what's inside these books, the pure golden oil. Can everybody see these? They're available at the offices. And I want to present also the Book of Yahweh in gold. Maybe you can see it better if we hold it up here. Now these will be available by special order here, so get your orders in and we'll get you a Book of Yahweh with a gold cover. And Pastor, these are your books. I'll set them here for you. Praise Yahweh. And so, yes, in certain cases in the house of Yahweh, you most definitely can judge a book by its cover. Because what's in these books is what it takes to bring us to the point of finishing this work, this great work. Now, to finish up here, let's turn over to Revelation 3. Revelation 3 and verse 17. Now, when we came here, this is how we were. All right? Because you say, I am rich and an increase with possessions and have need of nothing, and do not know that we were wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. I counsel you to buy gold tried in the fire. Right here. Buy gold tried in the fire. And white raiment. Okay, now think about what's in the white there in Isaiah 1 when he says, though your sins be as scarlet, you will be as white as snow. The purification process, the removal of sin, the repenting of sin and converting to Yahweh's laws, taking that sin away from us so that we're pure and white on the inside. All right, now turn over to Ecclesiastes 12, and we'll close in Ecclesiastes 12. Because there's not much time left, brethren. There is no time left to play around. We got to get serious. We have to be as the wise virgins and fill our lamps and our jars and our bowls with this golden oil. It's going to be too late. And Yahshua gave that parable for us in these last days. Because it's this group only that is alive at this time and waiting on Him, and are going to resurrect the rest after we get that authority. But we must qualify. They, without us, will not make it. And not that we're so great and special, but Yahweh did see fit that we would be born in this last generation and have part in this last work, the greatest work. In Ecclesiastes 12 and verse 6, remember your Creator before the silver cord is cut, before the golden bowl is broken. And I hope your bowl is golden up here and filled with the golden oil. That's where you put it, by the way. And before the pitcher shatters at the fountain, before the water wheel breaks at the cistern. In verse 8, vanity of vanities, says Koheleth. All is vanity, emptiness. Yes, the world has nothing. Life is the thinnest of vapors, fleeting as a breath and amounting to nothing, especially when you're groping in the darkness and you have no answers. Well, let's look at verse 13 and we'll close here. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Reverence Yahweh by observing and keeping His laws, which is the whole duty of man. For Yahweh will bring every work into judgment, including every secret hidden thing. Don't think you can have the gold on the outside and hiding sins on the inside, whether it is righteous or whether it is evil. Brethren, that's all the time we have now. If everyone will please stand. May Yahweh bless your understanding. Let's continue to go for the gold. And at this time, we'll turn the services over to the great Kohan Zephaniah Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Please be seated. This backdrop is better than any network news set I've ever seen. It's excellent. Really is great. We're going to start now with a story about the EU and the Cyprus bank accounts. They just all of a sudden cut off people's bank accounts, no matter how much money they had in there, and didn't allow them to get the bank out. And there's a commentator who's a UK Independence Party MEP, Nigel Farage, and he gives his perspective, and he says how they're going to stop at nothing to keep these banks afloat. And he tells how they could, if they did it in this country, they could do it in other countries, and he basically said they could do it anywhere. He's not exactly mentioning the United States because this does deal with the EU, but this is the Germans, he says, are really behind this. And remember, Germany is, in a large sense, the center of the Roman Empire. Now, we have also a shooting at a Marine base where a Marine killed 2 other Marines, including a female, and then he killed himself. And this story, they don't get into the depth of it, but this is this ridiculous idea they have of mixing the men and the women in combat with guns. And I saw a documentary one time that said that the military, especially like these aircraft carriers, are just like floating high schools now. And now you've got to take a floating high school and then you add the guns. And they said to give you a sense of what a tough week it's been for the Marine Corps, there were no fatalities for the Marines in Afghanistan for the month of March. But just this week alone, there have been 10 fatalities for the Marines in the U.S. So who's the enemy? And as Yahweh shows, every man is an enemy. Then there was a shooting rampage and a wild chase in Texas, and the shooter was shot dead. And this has more significance than they're talking about, too, because this is somewhat related to the shooting of the prosecutor in Texas, where they just randomly shot the prosecutor, and they have no idea who did it. This man is suspected of shooting a prison official, just walking up to his door, knocking on the door, and then killing him. They have no defense against these types of attacks, and they're wondering if it's orchestrated and coordinated, but they don't know. Then there's the White House on the Syria. There was a chemical weapons attack in Syria, and the rebels are saying it was the government. The government are saying it's the rebels. And the U.S. is saying that this is a red line if it turns out to be Syria, and the U.S. is going to get involved, which of course they want to. 70,000 people have already been killed in this war. That's over half of Abelin. And then North Korea is on military alert, and then it also shows that the U.S. Has increased its troop strength in South Korea from 30,000 to around 39,000 in the past few years without really telling anyone. But the commentator in this shows that what it's really aimed at is China. That's what they're actually going for. And this matches up with the story. Remember, Bob Shifa talking about the communist bosses. Remember, he laughed after that when the communist boss was beat up. So you can see they're going after China, just like they're going after Syria. Instead of calling them the regime, they're going to call them the Communist Party bosses. That's their bullying term. CBS almost broadcasts their punches when it comes to what the U.S. is going to do militarily. So let's play the news.
Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrayl Hawkins. Well, we'll start our broadcast off tonight with news from Europe and the economic troubles that they're facing. But this time, Jeff, it's not Greece that's facing the problems. It's Cyprus. That's right. We'll now turn it over to our correspondent, Larry McGee. Now, Larry, we understand that Cyprus is seeking another bailout, but it's not been making a big splash in the news media like Greece was. Is it because it's not that big of a deal, or is it?
Though not having received much popular attention lately, Cyprus is still undergoing massive financial turmoil. And this week, riot police lined outside Parliament as it was scheduled to vote on a tax law which many are calling a cash grab. In commenting on the crisis, MEP Mr. Nigel Farage of the United Kingdom Independence Party says the real issue at hand is an irreconcilable split between the north and the south of Europe. Germany, the Netherlands, and Finland in particular, where there is very strong political opposition against more government bailouts. Cyprus is now the 5th country out of 17 which is in need of being bailed out. But according to experts, the EU cannot afford to let Cyprus fail. Neither it nor Portugal, Greece, Ireland, or Spain. If either fails, the predictions are that the entire alliance will collapse and nations like Germany will suffer the heaviest losses, losing possibly as much as €1 trillion. For this reason, Mr. Farad says they are willing to do absolutely anything to keep the euro afloat, including what he says can only be described as theft. They've done it in one country, and they are quite capable of doing it in other nations as well. And his advice, if you have money in the bank, get it out while you can. And to foreign investors, don't invest in the Eurozone. In his opinion, one would have to be mad to do so. According to Farage, it is now being run by people who don't respect democracy, don't respect the rule of law, and have no respect for the basic principles upon which Western civilization is supposed to be based. They are propping up a Eurozone, which in the end is going to collapse in disastrous failure, he says. As for Cyprus, Mr. Farage believes it would do best by allowing itself to officially go bankrupt, to default on its international bond obligations, and to do their best to maintain their banking industry and restore some certainty in very uncertain times. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Once again, Larry, we appreciate your report. Now, in Quantico, Virginia this week, a Marine killed 2 other Marines before taking his own life. The authorities are trying to learn more about the suspect and a possible motive as to why 3 active duty Marines are now dead.
The shooting began around 11 p.m. when the suspect shot and killed 1 Marine inside a barracks building at Quantico Marine Corps Base. Both local and military police responded to the scene surrounding the suspect and putting the base on lockdown.
Announcements to residents were made over the base's PA system, and notifications were sent to residents via Facebook and Twitter, which instructed base residents to remain inside their homes with their doors locked. Now, the standoff lasted throughout the night before the all-clear was given base-wide.
According to sources, the suspect died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound after taking the life of another Marine who was trapped in the barracks with him. Now, to give you a sense of what a tough week it's been for the Marines, Jeff, there's been no fatalities in Afghanistan in the month of March. But just this week alone, there have been 10 fatalities in the United States.
Now, in other news, police are hoping a high-speed chase and shootout in Texas may give clues to who murdered Colorado's chief of corrections in cold blood. Now, as local police in Wise, Texas, were doing a routine traffic stop, the suspect sped by them at a high rate of speed and opened fire. Now, Chief Rex Hoskins recalled he had his arm out of the window and he was just shooting.
That sounds scary. After his car was struck broadside by an 18-wheeler, the suspect, amazingly, exited the mangled vehicle with a firearm and engaged deputies in a firefight. He was eventually taken into custody, but is now believed to be brain dead, probably from the trauma from the impact. Initially, the identity of the suspect was a mystery since there was no identification found on him, but police now believe the suspect is Evan Spencer Ebal, but are seeking conclusive identification.
Now, the suspect's car, a late model Cadillac, is actually what caught the eye of police. It appears to be a very similar vehicle to a suspicious vehicle seen outside the home of Colorado Corrections Chief Tom Clements. Now, he was gunned down at his front door Tuesday night. Now, Colorado police believe his killing was not random, but a specific target.
Texas police are looking into a second possible murder connection. Nathan Leon, a pizza delivery man, was shot and killed last Sunday. Texas police discovered a Domino's pizza jacket and a pizza delivery box inside Ebal's car after he was apprehended. Police are hoping the suspect's gun and ballistic evidence will help them figure out if he was involved in either killing.
We now move to recent events in Syria. Now, President Obama says that the use of chemical weapons would be a game changer. President Obama believes that President Assad has lost his credibility.
Wow. According to recent Syrian state TV, President Bashar al-Assad made a rare public appearance. Despite the fact that Syria has been marred with violence for 2 years, Mr. Assad seemed confident and in control. He visited a children's center for victims injured in the conflict, and he comforted some of their mothers and told them that the war was one of will and perseverance.
In the province of Aleppo, Syrian state TV showed video of what appears to be injuries caused by chemical weapons fired by rebel fighters. Syrian rebels confirmed that a Scud missile did hit the area, but that it was fired by the Syrian government.
Well, sounds like a lot of tit for tat there. The U.S. government said that if chemical weapons are used, that would be a red line, triggering an American response. As a side note, Jeff, this month, or at this time, the Syrian conflict is entering into its third year, and so far there have been over 70,000 deaths as a result of this conflict.
A lot of deaths for no progress.
That's absolutely correct.
Now, from the Middle East to the Far East, the North Korean President Kim Jong-un has put its military on the highest alert, including rocket units and long-range artillery units designed to strike targets on the U.S. mainland, Hawaii, Guam, and other operational zones in the Pacific, as well as all other enemy targets in South Korea and its vicinity.
President Un said, in order to protect our nation's sovereignty and the highest dignity, we will show off our army and our people's stern reaction through military actions.
Now, focusing our attention a little bit on South Korea, according to the U.S. Department of Defense, the United States has 37,000 troops stationed in South Korea. That's 9,000 more soldiers than what the two countries settled upon in 2008. Now, the U.S. has the goal to share military command with Seoul, increasing flexibility in Asia. Now, this plan includes merging military bases in South Korea to fewer locations, improving the military's ability to deter North Korea.
Now, these moves, although seemingly consolidating, could target other Asian countries and potentially expand the U.S.'s reach into the region. Top U.S. officials who visited South Korea assured them that Washington's budget cuts would not affect South Korea as a defense priority. Despite that, some South Koreans worry about the financial burden that they'll have to bear.
Now, many South Korean residents don't desire the added burden in additional taxes for the added number of U.S. troops in the area. Some reports suggest that Washington could demand that Seoul pay up to 50% support to U.S. for the troops in South Korea. Now, currently, Seoul is expected to pay $770 million, and the next year's projection cost could top as much as $900 million. Now, Katan, that's a lot of money for military.
Oh, yeah.
But salvation is absolutely free.
Now, you can contact the House of Yahweh to get your free copies of the latest Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. You can simply do so by writing the House of Yahweh at P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can also call at 1-800-613-9494. You can also email them at info@yahweh.com, and don't forget to visit their website at www.yahweh.com or www.yisraelhawkins.com. And of course, all calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is Yisrayl Hawkins, explaining Bible prophecies and giving you scriptural knowledge that no one else can. For all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for joining us.
Everyone, please stand. The greatest teacher in the world, the great Kohan Yisrayl Hawkins!
Oh, look at that. Look at that crowd. Man, oh man, oh man. Beautiful. Praise Yahweh. I hope you're getting shots of this. This is beautiful. Let's go now. You may be seated. We were louder than Vatican Square that time. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Hope you're all over all that food you ate last night. I don't think I'll want to eat again until the feast is over. The great night. We got a great feast ahead of us here. Really great. A lot. Praise Yahweh. All kinds of great activities planned in learning Yahweh's way, and of course that is what is important. The beast's way is crumbling. Now, I guess if you've been noticing the news, you saw that the gays, as they call themselves, are outnumbering the unions between men and women, and the opinion polls are now outnumbering the ones who doesn't want this evil. And the Vatican now, since 53%, when it goes over 50%, then the Vatican starts leaning, opening, making statements that, oh yes, they've been for this, you know, but not all together, but to see how the reaction will be. And this article here, this is a great psychiatry. It's the psychology behind this thing is it's of course all they study is psychology. They don't study the scriptures. But it says the Vatican top official on family policy has opened slightly to the possibility of rights for gay civil unions. Well, of course, it's been opened completely, and they keep it behind closed doors till it pops out with lawsuits. But now they're making out like, they're leaning towards it. There's a slight possibility that this could be approved of. If you notice, the Supreme Court, it's far from supreme, but they call themselves the Supreme Court. They're back and forth on everything, depending on the amount of people, the amount of votes for it or against it. And of course, they're going to run with that. Whatever the majority vote is, that's where they want to run. They are not at all. They refused Yahweh's way, so they refused the Supreme Court, the true Supreme Court, which will take over the universe. Praise Yahweh. The gold, I'm glad to see the sermons on this gold. I understand there's many planned, and many more planned besides the one that the great Kohan Shaul brought just now. I'm not going to bring a sermon on it because everyone else is bringing it, and I don't see any need in me having to cover that. Now there are a couple of issues that I do want to cover just slightly, but some of them have been covered. But you need to know, if you turn over with me to Psalms 45, you need to know what is actually shown here. The King James Version was great, and that's where I originally got it, and I got that King James Version down pretty pat in my mind, and it's still hanging with me. But let me use, I'll read you the King James Version here on the gold in Psalms 45, 9 through 13. If you go back to 6, you'll see who it's talking about, because they changed it to king later, but it's actually Yahweh there that you can see they're talking about. Thy throne, O Yahweh, is forever and ever. That is, you're the supreme judge. You have the supreme court. It's not of man. Man has rejected Yahweh's way, and it's like groping in the dark, as the Scripture says. They're groping in the dark for answers, and there are no answers, as the politicians are saying. But your throne, O Yahweh, is forever and ever. The scepter of thy kingdom is a righteous scepter. Now, they put the word right in the King James Version, trying to take out the word righteousness, because righteousness is plainly said is the keeping of Yahweh's laws. But the King James Version put right instead of righteous. The Amplified Bible, if you have that combination, it actually uses the word righteousness. The scepter of righteousness is the scepter of your kingdom. So, they know they're making, they know they're hiding things, and of course, I'm sure there was some persecution on the Amplified Bible, the ones who put this out, because they do bring out quite a few things in there that the King James Version doesn't. Now, in verse 9, it says, it changes the word Yahweh to kings. Kings. Well, but that word, as all the authorities show, is Yahweh, and they removed it from the Scriptures. Yahweh's daughters, that's Yahweh's daughters, were among thy honorable women. Upon thy right hand did stand the queen in gold, let's see, I want to go through 13. Verse 12 says, and the daughter of Tyre. Well, of course, that's wrong too. Shall be with a gift. If you notice, well, you can't notice the King James Version. They have a lot of italics here, showing that they added a bunch of words. Even the rich among the people shall entreat thy favor. The kings, again, they remove the name Yahweh. The Yahweh's daughters is all glorious. Within her clothing is wrought gold. She shall be brought unto Yahweh. This is a prophecy now of you. She shall be brought unto Yahweh in remnant of needlework. The virgin or virgins, her companions that follow her, shall be brought unto you, or thee, shall be brought unto thee. Well, the correction, you have your book of Yahweh there, so you can follow with me on that. But the word king, it actually means Yahweh, as shown by all the authorities there. But Gesenius shows it. If you have a Gesenius, you can use it along with your Strongs and see that this was Yahweh. The word in verse 11, the word your beauty, the word your beauty, according to Gesenius, is to deck with, to clothe with gold. Beauty, that should have been translated that way. To clothe with gold. And of course the gold representing righteousness, as the great Kohan Shaul brought out. In verse 11 also, the word ruler there actually means father. The word ruler actually means father. And the father, of course, is Yahweh. And then in verse 12, you see the word Tyre, and that there also, according to Gesenius, means Yahweh. They removed it and put the word Tyre. The words in verse 12 which say, come with a gift, that word, according to Gesenius, means a bloodless offering. Come with a gift means a bloodless offering. And then verse 12, let's see, the Hebrew word is listed on page 854 of Gesenius, Hebrew and Chaldees Lexicon by Edward Robinson, which shows this word means in the presence of or before. Come before Yahweh. And the correct translation of that can be no other but this: daughters of Yahweh are among your honorable women, and at your right hand stands the bride in gold, in gold. Praise Yahweh. Verse 11, for Yahweh, well, maybe better read verse 10 also. Listen, O daughters, hear, consider, and hear us. Forget your own people and your father's house. Your father, that is your earthly father's house. For Yahweh wants you to be clothed in gold. Yes, Yahweh wants you to be clothed in gold, and you can't do this hanging on to worldly people, of course. For he is your father, so you should reverence him. The daughter of Yahweh will be, this is verse 12, the daughter of Yahweh will come before you, offering herself to you. The rich of the people will entreat you for your honor. All glorious in the all glorious is Yahweh's daughters. Within her residence, her clothing is interwoven with gold. Meaning, of course, now righteousness, as you see before this. And then in Revelations, we see the same thing appearing now. In Revelations 1, if you want to turn there, Revelations 1:13 we'll start with, because it's speaking of the same thing, but this is the finishing, of course, of his house and work in these last days. Revelations 1 and verse 13, he says, And in the midst of the seven lampstand, one like the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the feet, with a girdle of gold about his chest. The hair of his head was white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire. This is off too, but but you'd have to have it explained fully with words before you'd understand it. But I think we have that out already. Verse 15, and his feet glowed like bronze, which had been fired in a furnace, and his voice sounded like many waters. Verse 16, in his right hand he had 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a sharp two-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in its strength. Verse 17, and when I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead, but he laid his right hand upon me, saying to me, Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last. I am the one who lives, but was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Hallelujah, Yahweh. And I have the keys of death and Sheol, the grave. As you know, he's been given full judgment. He's the one that's over the work in the last days that will bring about the resurrection. Now, the word feet in verse 115, if you'll find that quickly, the word feet in chapter 1 and verse 15. Look at the word feet. Is translated from the Hebrew word regalim. This word is listed on page 1418 and 1419 of Volume 2 of the Hebrew Aramaic English Dictionary by Marcus Jethro, which shows this word means feet, to lead, to persuade, that you, O Yahweh, may lead me by your law. And all of this is written there for you to read, that you, O Yahweh, may lead me by your law the evening before a feast Abel. Praise Yahweh. If you go back to Yochanan 13:1, we read this in Yeshua's memorial. Yochanan 13:1, now before the feast of the Passover. Do you men get that? You got it? You reading it there? Now let me read you again what is written here in Marcus Jethro. I mean, anyone can read this, and we give you the page number, the volume number, everything. It says, which shows this word means feet, to lead, persuade, that you, O Yahweh, may lead me by your law the evening before a feast Abel. Yahweh puts these things, where he'll have to show you. Otherwise, you'd never see or understand, or it wouldn't make sense, at all. And doesn't till, of course, you get till Yahweh brings his house, who's the only ones he's showing at this time. But that word bronze now, in Revelations 1:15, means actually polished gold. Polished gold. We put bronze there because that was the normal thing for back when we first started translating. In Revelations then, 1:13 through 18 is saying, and in the midst of the seven lampstand, which is the lampstand, of course, is the seven works of Yahweh, one like the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the feet, with a girdle of gold about his chest. The hair of his head was white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire. And at Abel, he taught the law of Yahweh. At Abel. So it is our high priest, our great high priest and king over the house of Yahweh in these last days that is doing this teaching. I am the vine, you are the branches, Yeshua said. Now, that pretty well establishes that he is the vine, don't you think? I am the vine. He wouldn't have said that if he wasn't. But now he has a branch coming out to the last days' work, as he says. And as the prophet saw, it has golden oil coming out of that branch, falling down into the house of Yahweh. You got the picture? That's it. The house of Yahweh. Because that branch now, remember, he branches out. And he builds what? He establishes what? Zechariah 6 in verse 11 and 12. And between the two of them, the branch and Yeshua, the golden oil pours out to make you like fine polished gold. Verse 15, and at Abel he taught the law of Yahweh, whose light is like polished gold, which had been fired in a furnace, and his voice sounded like many waters, and in his right hand he had 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a sharp two-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in its strength. And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead, but he laid his right hand on me, saying to me, do not be afraid, I am the first and the last. I am he who lives. I am he who lives but was dead. That was Yeshua. He died on this day, of course. Before this day, just before this day, the day before this day we're in now. He died on that day, and behold, I am alive evermore. He was raised from the dead by Yahweh. Hallelujah, Yahweh, and I have the keys of death and Sheol. He's the judge over who lives and dies at this time. Including the sermons of gold, I understand, includes the priestess, future priestess, and the future priest. I understand they got sermons on this too. The evangelist. You probably didn't know this, but you might have heard it. I don't know, but our evangelist a couple of weeks ago, they went turkey hunting, and they went turkey hunting with a motorhome, and killed the turkey. Yeah, and killed the turkey, which is going to bring you big trouble now. Right away, here's Nagelbauer, and a few others in Congress, and they're already getting a law on the books that you can't use but one motorhome per turkey. And of course, they're coming back with the argument, but you know, it doesn't fully clean them when you just hit them with one motorhome. You got to have at least 16. Otherwise, you leave feathers on them and they're not koshered right. Now, all that's going through Congress right now, and others standing up. There is no answers to this. There's just only arguments to this. Well, that's the shape the world is in right now, and that's the reason the Pope can't make up his mind to reveal at this time that they're sodomites or whatever they may be. But anyway, the evangelist has some great stories to tell, and they're really great, and they're not just stories either. They're the truth, and they'll be bringing it to you. And you're going to marvel at how much they have improved in the last since the last feast. I want you to turn over to Daniel, the 12th chapter, and as Yahshua says, you're a fool if you don't believe the prophecies, because the prophecies tell it all, every bit of it. It's everything about the house of Yahweh and His plan is told in the Holy Scriptures. So there's no mistaking where Yahweh's work is. It's actually called the house of Yahweh. The prophets called it the house of Yahweh. The prophet said in the last days, and then they tell you what the last days is, what it entails. One of the evangelists has some great work on the increase of knowledge that Yahweh promised here in the last day. For an unbeliever, how could you possibly look at the world and see that for 6,000 years mankind was in the same rut? He was still using horses and mules and wagons to travel in, even when I was a child. And then Yahweh says knowledge will increase and He will invent the nuclear bomb that can darken the sun. But He says knowledge will be increased at that time. Now, how could you not believe this? Is your mind just so foolish that it can't take in any reasoning at all? How could anyone still be an atheist with such proof as this coming before? Well, of course, I know the religious organizations, they don't bring this because they don't understand it. And if you look at Daniel 12:10, you will see here the reason that you don't understand. Daniel 12:10, he said, many will be purified and made white. That word there is actually gold, and tried and tested, but the wicked will continue to do wickedly. Wickedness, of course, is breaking Yahweh's laws, breaking the 10 Commandments. Surely anyone can read the 10 Commandments and see that the religious organizations are not keeping the 10 Commandments. Anyone could do that if you know how to read. and surely in today's modern society, modern civilization, surely we can read. We got books in front of us all the time, everywhere. Now, you didn't always have this book of Yahweh. This was brought about in the last days by the reestablished house of Yahweh in these last days. Praise Yahweh. There were manuscripts, but they weren't available. Manuscripts of the prophets and apostles. There was even books of Yahweh, but they were locked up in vaults because they didn't want anyone to see the book of Yahweh. Who was that they? They sit on 7 hills. Revelation 17 shows they sit on 7 hills. And they also show they are the leaders of the kings of the earth. Now, there's a bunch of sermons coming this feast that you really need to hear concerning that prophecy. The increase of knowledge, how the Vatican has control. It's a very unsafe place to put your money now in the bank. They're saying you better get it out because the Vatican has too much control. Now, it looks like someone else has control, but they don't know who. They just don't know. They just can't find out who it is that has control over these banks and are closing down bank accounts, closing down countries. They're actually using this to close down countries. Malachi Martin explained this in his book, The Keys of This Blood, and he says, the Vatican has people with big money. They have gained the wealth over the years, and of course they are all Catholics, Masons, and so forth. But they've gained this wealth over the years, and of course they can take money and they can put it in whatever way they want to change what they want to change. And it's the money that makes to change. So he says they can say whether a nation rises or falls. Well, of course, in the last few years since that book came out, and since prophecy said this was going to start taking place, Malachi Martin said in this book, Mary, they call her Queen Mary, I call her Bloody Mary, is going to make war with anyone who will not accept her, who will not worship her. And that's what the Scripture says, of course. Well, he brought it out in his book, that this was what was going to take place. He knew their plans. I knew the prophecy. And he and I both were speaking together to bring forth this message. He was bringing the message to all the Catholics to show them what the Catholic Church, the Vatican, was going to do. Now, he said the Vatican is using the nations for this, to bring this about. Using the nations. The Tony Blair, who was the Prime Minister of Great Britain, he announced right away that he had converted to the Catholic Church. President Bush said when he looked in the face of the Pope, he saw God. And of course, that's what he's seeing. He's seeing God. And this is what the 12 tribes, if you will just read your scriptures, you'll see, even in a King James Version, I knew this. You will see that the 12 tribes turn back to God worship. They didn't turn to it, they turned back to it. Back to the God worships they had before Yahweh brought them out of the land of Egypt. Promising them, of course, a country flowing with milk and honey, their own country. On the way, he also said, I will take sickness and disease away from you if you'll follow these laws. He gave them some great incentives to follow his laws. And this is what Moshe was teaching. If you follow these laws of mine, I will do this and this. Well, Deuteronomy 28, if you remember, it shows you exactly what will take place in your life if you will follow these laws, the blessings you will bring into your house and family. Now, that's exactly what we're doing today. The Peaceful Solution says, you'll have the answer. Here it is. You have the answer to every problem. Praise Yahweh. Before the problem arises, you'll have the answer already. You don't even have to think about it. This is the answer right here. And you will have all these blessings following you, he says. Now, on the other hand, starting with verse 15 of that same chapter, but if you will not keep these laws, these are the curses that's going to come. And he shows you everything that's going to take place in today's world, that is taking place in today's world. The first thing was the fornication, the adultery, the child abuse, the abuse between men and women and women. And then he shows you a dust, a fallout dust, as he calls it, that will come down from heaven upon you. Even a fool or a foolish scientist that doesn't even believe in Yahweh knows that this is describing fully, even giving you the color of the fallout dust that's going to come down upon you because you have defiled your mind with not keeping Yahweh's laws, with fornication, the eating of pork, adultery, homosexuality. He says these things are going to come upon you, and your mind is going to be confused, where you'll be groping in the dark for answers. Can we use 16 motorhomes or one motorhome to kill these turkeys? And right away, now, this is something else. The Pope is trying to make up his mind. He's put out this statement, I believe these turkeys have suffered enough. Now, enough is enough. And some of the politicians are saying the same thing. But what is the answer? They don't have it. Their minds are so confused, they don't have it. And we have it out here like a light, Yahweh says. Like a light. It's shining. It's shining right here in the house of Yahweh. And wait till you see what the evangelists have really done. And you will see that people in the world, worldly people, are saying, I don't care what these quackos say. I'm looking at this for myself right here, and I'm seeing the results of it and how the answers are here. One person I noticed had made the statement, and they told me they were going to show it. She made the statement, you know, we're looking at you, you're like a shining light, and we're saying, every one of us here is saying we would like to be like you. Speaking of our evangelist. Well, of course, we're going to change this world, but Yahweh shows here that none of the wicked will understand. So if you want to practice wickedness, you won't understand, even though that it's plain as day, it's as light as a lamp hanging on a wall, but you won't be able to understand it. Now, he told you before that, he said knowledge would be increased. And he shows you what the world would do with that knowledge, but there's something in wickedness that actually blocks the mind from understanding prophecy, understanding the reason why we should keep the laws, understanding the reason that Yahweh will not allow in this kingdom where righteousness dwells, he will not allow, praise Yahweh. He says in Revelations and in 2 Kepha also, he said, this kingdom, it won't allow wickedness into it, and this is what we're looking for, a kingdom in which righteousness dwells, righteousness only. Well, the prophet Daniel here, he shows this. He also shows the two witnesses in this chapter. He shows the great tribulation in that chapter. He shows the resurrection in that chapter. All of these things that the house of Yahweh is going to bring, they're going to bring all of these to pass because we are the sons of man. The Son of Man. And from mankind, Yahweh said, in the beginning, and this is what all the prophets taught and all the apostles taught, mankind, from the beginning, Yahweh promised him, I'm going to make you like me, like Yahweh. I'm going to make man in my likeness and in my image. Then he shows all through the Holy Scriptures that his likeness is perfect righteousness. Perfect righteousness. He won't settle for anything else. It's got to be that pure polished gold that we said last night when we put this on for the first time and displayed it to Yahweh. We said, we are going to live this way. Praise Yahweh. We've got a truly great feast. I've got a gold book of Yahweh here that I'm so pleased with. Just looking at it, it's so beautiful. It's like these gold pants. I said, man, I'm afraid to wear those. Look at yeah. Do I have to put on a clean shirt? I'll be afraid to do any work. But these gold books, now they represent our righteousness. Don't forget that. That's what we got to live up to. Look at that. Beautiful. Shining like gold. Not black and white, but black and gold. Well, I'm going to share this with you. Every bit of it, every page, every verse. I'm going to share it with you. And that is throughout all eternity. Yahweh didn't call us out of this world for us to die, brother. And He called us out of the world to receive an everlasting position in His kingdom. All we have to do is just believe it and follow it. But you know, I can't see any disbelief. I can't see that here anymore. You know, everyone here that I know of believes what the Scripture says. Yep, they do. May you have a wonderful, joyous feast. We got also the Peaceful Solution Character Education Seminar now that I believe starts tomorrow, and the teachers are prepared. Don't miss it. This is really great what they got lined up. So take advantage of it for you and your children. And but the whole feast is going to be great. We're gonna. Your head is going to be so full. You know, it's going to be like it's about to pop before you leave this feast. May Yahweh bless you. I love you.